Hi guys, I thought that I would set you maybe just one more unseen poem essay to do for me. Now, I've ummed and ahed between the pairs that I've got. So the ones that I was thinking of, I was going to do The Voice and Sonnet 23, so that's Thomas Hardy and John Milton. The question about that is after the death of a loved one. If you don't like the two that I'm going to do now and you read the other two and you think, actually, I prefer that question, I prefer those two poems, I don't like the ones, I'm happy for you to do either. So either the pair of the Voice and the Sonnet 23 by John Milton, or I'm going to talk you through the pair which is Before You Were Mine by Carol Ann Duffy. She's obviously a 20th/21st century poet. And Under the Waterfall by Thomas Hardy, who is a romantic poet from the 19th century. So, what I would like you to do is sort of pause me here, and I'd like you to get your booklets out and read both poems and do some basic annotations. So do what you normally do, highlight keywords, get your pencil, circle bits that are jumping out at you. Try and decide after you first read through roughly what the tone is, and make sure you have a look at the question. It's to do with memory of a loved one. Let me just get the exact question here. So, compare and contrast how the poems present the idea of love through memory. Okay, so make sure you've written that. I often write it at the top of where the two poems are just to keep my mind really focused. So obviously they're going to be about memory. That's a really good starter for you. But if you could pause me now and do your annotations. This is going to be my pause face. Okay, that's long enough. So now you can unpause me. So let's talk about the fact that we've got two different contexts going on. We've got a female writer, please don't forget gender as well, and we have a male writer. Now, we know quite a lot about Thomas Hardy. We know that he wrote a lot about love, and he had a wife called Emma, whom he loved very much at the beginning, but they sort of fell out of love and then she died, and he then wrote lots and lots of poems about how mad he was at her for dying and the fact that they didn't love each other in the end, and he didn't really know how to feel about that, and he should grieve her, and he was grieving her, but he wasn't sure whether he was grieving the old her or the new her, lots of that stuff. Now, a number of his collections are to do with Emma, but you have to be careful when you see an unseen poem by Thomas Hardy, because they're not all about Emma. He wrote a lot about nature, he used nature, and he talked about love in very wider terms than just his own wife, okay? So when we look at Under the Waterfall, this is a recalled memory, and it's quite a beautiful image of a couple going picnicking and describing dropping this glass into a little waterfall that they can't get out, and the glass stays there forever. It's there forever. It's almost as like a moment of their young honeymoon period sort of love that they experience, and that glass will always be there even if the love doesn't survive in the end, okay? So don't get bogged down in whether it's about his wife or not. Doesn't really matter. We're just looking at how he uses memory to present this type of love that he's presenting in here, okay? So, Before You Were Mine, Carol Ann Duffy. She was born in the 20th century. She's obviously still alive now. She writes a lot. Interesting that she often uses a lot of very sort of postmodern techniques. She often uses a lot of enjambment. She often doesn't have lots of structure to her poetry. If you don't know anything about Carol Ann Duffy and don't want to write this essay right now, go away and just read a bit about her, read about her collections, read about her style, maybe read some of her poems. Her latest collection is called Sincerity, and I did have a copy, but I lent it to someone and I have never seen it again. But it's all about Brexit, Trump. It's very political, whereas a lot of her stuff from like the middle of her career was more feminist. In fact, she was basically part of second wave feminism. She's an absolute beast, and I can't wait to teach her to you next year, because you're already wonderful little feminists, but you're just going to be like ultra super feminist by the time you've read Duffy, and you're going to be proper fangirling her. Okay, so I'm getting distracted. So I'm hoping that the first thing you did when you started this was, even if you didn't know what they're about, you start thinking about, okay, we've got first person. So Carol Ann Duffy is I'm 10 years away from the corner you laugh on. So it's first person, and it's written direct address to the person that they are talking to. Okay, so it's you could argue a dramatic monologue. What's also really interesting, I was just mentioning Duffy's style, is that it feels very structured when you just look at the four stanzas with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you've got quintains, and they do seem very organised, as if everything is very controlled and tightly put together intentionally. Bearing in mind this is very unlike Duffy. She doesn't do a lot of poems where they look like this. Whereas in contrast, you look at Under the Waterfall, there is actually a typo in Under the Waterfall, and that's, I don't quite know why it's there, but it is. It should be a drinking glass. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 lines up from the bottom on the left-hand column. So this one feels a lot more fluid in the sense that there's no set length of stanzas, and the line lengths don't always work out. Although, you know what I've just said? Now I've just said that, I'm actually going to Google and I'm actually going to look at it properly, because what I might have done is I might have made it not quite work to try and get it all on one page. So what I would recommend you do is maybe pause me again and go and pull up a copy of Under the Waterfall on screen properly. I should have done that before starting my video. Never mind. Let's talk about Before You Were Mine. So let's talk titles. Before You Were Mine, there's a feeling of ownership there. I'm hoping that you've pulled that out. And the whole tone of it, I love the vocab in here. So you've got the polka dot dress, you've got references to Marilyn Monroe, you've got ballrooms, fizzy movie tomorrows. That's such a beautiful image of youth. You've got, you've got the reference to the small bites on your neck, sweetheart. And I really like the last line about the glamorous love lasts where you sparkle and waltz and laugh before you were mine. I'm feeling all emotional today. Lockdown is having some serious effects on me, but this is such a beautiful poem. I don't know if you've had a think about who it might be written to, because it's clearly written to somebody. I'm going to ruin it slightly for you and tell you that I know that it's written to her mother. So it doesn't have to be, and you didn't need to have that in your interpretation. And if you would like to write your answer as if you didn't have that information, you can. Absolutely not a problem. But the idea that before you were mine, like that concept of possession, that love, that where you feel like you own somebody, but not in a negative, like male-dominating kind of possessive way. Okay. I'm 10 years away from the corner you laugh on with your pals, Maggie McGreeny and Jean Duff. The three of you bend from the waist, holding each other or your knees, and shriek at the pavement. Your polka dot dress blows around your legs, Marilyn. So you've got this image of Marilyn Monroe. Obviously, she's conjuring a 20th century icon of beauty, and there's that scene where she's in the street holding her white dress down. It's all blowing around her. And if you haven't seen that image, where have you been for the 17 years of your life? And please Google that. So there's this feeling of icon. The polka dot dress feels very of its time, very sort of 50s, and it's youth. That whole stanza is about youth. The image of, and the double names on all the children, so it's Maggie McGreeny and Jean Duff, so it feels like a girl with her girlfriends having a great time. And the shrieking at the pavement, the sheer joy at whatever it is, it doesn't matter, the nothingness that they're enjoying. I'm not here yet, which is kind of where you feel like it could be a lover who comes along later on, or it could be a child. The thought of me doesn't occur in the ballroom with 1,000 eyes, the fizzy movie tomorrows the right walk home could bring. So the idea that at the age that she's imagining or conjuring up an image of her mother, maybe from a photograph or whatever, although I have made that up, there's no reference to it definitely being a picture, but you can almost imagine her sitting there with an old picture of her mum on a, in a polka dot dress as a kid or whatever, and thinking, wow, I wonder what it was like when you were a kid. And she's saying, I'm not here yet, and you've got that very short sentence at the beginning there, kind of declarative, declaring that this is the youth and fun that you had before I came along. And he's talking about the ballroom, tea dances that people go to, and the 1,000 eyes, and everybody's looking out for each other, and the kind of the fizzy, the excitement of, you don't know that the right walk home, somebody walking you home, might end up with marriage and children. And the idea that the memory, and this is obviously a sort of made up memory of the child, it's a very complex idea of the memory here, is someone that they obviously love, but imagining them before you were born is like a level of memory which is, what's the word I'm thinking of? It's not wishful thinking, but like kind of seeing your parent as something as other than yours is quite a big step that I know that you don't really take until you're in your much later teens. You guys are probably about there, where you see them as real people, and you kind of, as hard as it might be, you go, I love to think of them having a good time before they met me, and I wonder what they did, and I wonder what they were like, and things like that. I'd be picking out the word the fizzy. Movie tomorrow. It's the idea that she's used Marilyn Monroe already, and the reference to movies, and the fact that when you're young you think that anything is possible, and kind of idealising that fizzy movie idea that you could fall in love, and anybody that you go on that date to that dance could be your future partner for the rest of your life. So I'm not going to go through every single bit because I'm going to run out of time on my thingy, but you need to be picking out the high-heeled red shoes. You need to be looking at the word relic. Please look that word up and have a think about how that impacts the memory, because she's then talking later on about putting her hands into her mum's shoes as a memory that she has, and then imagining that if she as a young girl could know her mother as a young girl, she'd teach her to cha-cha-cha down the footpath. And then you need to be talking all about the vocabulary and about how it's this beautiful, very uplifting, and I do feel very much like there's a glamour and icon sort of idolising of the mother before her figure there. Very personal. It does feel very 20th century because of the references. It's very of its time. It's not trying to, like, I would argue that Shakespeare's sonnets, for example, are fairly timeless. He's talking about big grand gestures, whereas this is quite a personal thing, and yet anybody can apply it to themselves, and how trying to imagine somebody in your life doesn't have to be a mother, but anybody where you think, oh, I'd love to have known them when they were young. So, Under the Waterfall, I've already kind of told you what the plot line is in this one. Now, this one's interesting because it's kind of in speech marks, as if somebody's telling you a story, and it's first person, and it's where they're on a picnic, lots of references to kind of the power of nature and the beauty of it all. I'm really running out of time, going as quick as I can. Now, the glass falls into the thing, and over time, he's imagining now that when he talks about its smoothness opalized, if you look up opalized, it means where water erodes is not the right word, washes it down. Oh, why doesn't my brain work anymore? I don't know what word, and I'm running out of time. It's flashing at me. Anyway, like when you get a bit of glass at the beach and it's gone smooth all the way around. That's what's happened to the glass. The idea that glass changes shape, love changes shape as you go through. That love might not have even survived, but the glass in some form or other is still there. So the idea that the memory of that moment has not changed, and yet there's some element of it still there. I'm going to turn it off because it's going to cut me off. Okay, if I need to add another video, I will. Okay, right.